None of this was your fault.
Good evening, everyone. And first off, thank you for your patience. My name is Bill Morse, and this is the first edition of the program, What Do You Think? We will be meeting every Thursday at 6 p.m. This is the first time we've been on the air, and we're just working out a couple of technicalities. So again, thank you for your patience. This will be a call-in program. I will give you more information on that later on. With this program, I will be asking an open-ended question. And the idea is to call in if you have an idea or your own answer to this open-ended question. And I'll give you an example. I would say since late last year, last summer, spiritualists and people involved with or who have made studies of what's happening beyond our six senses, be that spiritual or religious, have said that we will be, or we are already, in the age of Aquarius with the alignment of planets. And with this singular event, you may remember the song, This is the Age of Aquarius from the Fifth Dimension. That was a pop hit in '69, I believe. Anyway, there will be a lot of light coming into the world, a lot of openness. People will start questioning and looking for answers or explanations beyond what they can touch, see, feel, or hear, or watch on television or listen to on the radio. They will be looking for more answers than what's been provided. Also at this time, during this age of Aquarius, which will be the next year, year and a half, the government will be declassifying more information. That started in dribbles a couple of years ago. It's building up some momentum, and I think that's very necessary to kind of think, what questions would you have? What answers would you like to see or hear about some of the mysteries or some of the questions that have occurred over events in our country during the last 50 years? I'll give you one personal example, and then I'll go on to our first caller. But I was of age to go to Vietnam. I sought a deferment and entered the service later on. But I remember in the late 60s and early 70s I followed events in Vietnam, reports, Walter Cronkite and other print journalists. And I remember the emotion when the war ended in 75, I believe. And people were looking forward to American service members coming home. You have to remember that over the course of, I would say, 66 to 75, perhaps not 75, but 74, because the war was already drawing down at that time. We lost about 50,000 people, 50,000 people in Vietnam fighting to keep the South Vietnamese government in place. And you may remember a name of Henry Kissinger, who worked with then President Richard Nixon. And they had Paris peace talks between Hanoi in North Vietnam and Washington. And one of the understandings that was signed by both sides was a $5 billion, B as in boy, $5 billion rebuild aid program to go into Vietnam and undo or mitigate some of the damage that the conflict had caused. Landmines, for example, defoliation from Agent Orange, a number of other side effects that were still making much of the country basically uninhabitable or unfarmable, since it's mostly an agricultural country. And so we had promised $5 billion. The war ended. Many GIs did come back, but 800 were missing. 800 did not return. And it has always been my thought or belief that those 800 or more, perhaps 1,000 POWs, were held as collateral, waiting for that money, the $5 billion, to come over and actually see some reconstruction going on, sponsored by the American government. Our government reneged. The $5 billion was forgotten about. The mood at the time was just to forget that the war happened. Politicians were very shy to even approach the topic of Vietnam. After that, there was kind of a silence that ensued over the country over political discussion after the war ended, immediately after. So the $5 billion was forgotten, and so were the 800 to 1,000 POWs that never returned. Over the course of the year, there were sightings. I remember 6 or 7 specific sightings. And these sightings went before a commission that was headed by John Kerry. John Kerry, you may recognize his name. He was a one-time senator, candidate for president, and now is working with Joe Biden on climate change. You may have heard of him going from place to place in his jet plane. Anyway, Mr. Kerry, or Senator Kerry, was in charge of hearing potential sightings and investigating them on Caucasians being sighted, groups of Caucasians being sighted in the dense forests of Vietnam. Many were also held in Cambodia and Laos, neighbors to the west. And so the sightings were dismissed as being uncorroborated or being fictitious, or the witnesses being unreliable or untraceable. So the sightings amounted to little more than conjecture, people thinking that probably there are people left back there, but no action, at least no public action, had taken place, and as far as I know, there were no public action rescues. So my question, now that I think the mood has changed. We're more open. There's more light coming in during this age, this threshold of a new era we're experiencing. And also the declassification of government documents. My question, the mystery I would like to see solved, is what happened to those 800? Indeed, who was responsible for following up on these reports? What happened to the reports? And was anybody brought back? Now, of course, the case is moot because those people who, if indeed they were held, would be dead by now. But I think we have a moral obligation to family and friends of those service members to at least make an attempt through declassified documents, through a stronger, a more friendly relationship with the Vietnamese government, to give final closure to what happened to those over 800 American servicemen that were intentionally left behind, in my opinion. This is only my opinion. So, that's my mystery that I would like to see the government clear up. And I have a caller on the line with his choice of a mystery or a secret that he would like to see revealed over this year. So, the stage is set. So, what mystery? May I use your name?
Sure, absolutely.
Kurt. I feel more comfortable saying Kurt. Kurt, what mystery would you like to see cleared up by our government over the next 12 months or so?
Well, first of all, what I would like to say in regards to what you've already said is, first is I'd like to just thank you for your service for your country. I share your sorrow for some of the events in the Vietnam War. I lost friends over there, and I've also have acquaintances that have suffered from Agent Orange that have dealt with things like lung cancer and so forth. And it's indeed, the whole thing is an unfortunate event. But again, thanks for your service. One of the things, I grew up in Texas, and as a young child, lived through the Kennedy assassination. We were living in Houston, and of course that happened in Dallas, but being a Texan, the locals there really followed pretty much the events of the Kennedy assassination, and even following having the investigations done in 1964 with their commission, no one seems to be very satisfied with what the results of really who was responsible for the assassination. As a Texan, a lot of people thought maybe President Johnson was involved. There's so many other theories because of President Kennedy appointing his younger brother as Attorney General, who immediately after becoming that went after the mob. And the thought was, as the mob was involved in his assassination, particularly a gentleman named Carlos Marcellus, that's another question. Was somehow, the ultimate shooter just Lee Harvey Oswald? Because I remember seeing pieces of pavement removed from Elm Street, and they could have proven the bullet trajectory in this thing where you might have heard this thing of the grassy knoll, which is part of kind of a park called Dealey Plaza that's on the north side of Elm Street. There's puffs of smoke that have come from there from witnesses. The fact that nobody's ever seen the pieces of concrete that were removed from the street and replaced immediately after the assassination. Some people think maybe the CIA was involved. There's just too many questions that remain unresolved. I know that in the 70s there was another investigation kind of brought forth, but really nothing really came about. The conclusion was, it's only It was only Oswald. But even his death a couple of days later by a man that operated the Carousel Club in Dallas, it's unexplainable why a guy that owns a small business would go up and shoot the president's assassin.
Jack
What
Ruby.
would motivate him to do that? Jack Ruby.
Yes.
You know, really, I don't think we've really been told the whole story. I mean, the state of Texas was never able to give him the president an appropriate autopsy. He was rushed off to Washington, and the results of that autopsy, they did release some of the photographs from that, but again, his brain is missing. The brain would have shown the trajectory through his skull, and again would have proven where the bullets were coming from. Was this really an assassination, or was it an ambush? You know, and I think somebody as important as President of the United States, it's just unfortunate that more effort was not placed into trying to really get a conclusive response as to what happened. So that's that would be my personal, opinion. I'd like to see that happen as well. I don't know if it'll ever happen. And again, just like the Vietnam War, time is marching on, and people that are witnesses or part of a conspiracy, if there are any, they'll be gone. They're exonerated from any kind of persecution because of just their age. So
that's true, Kurt, but by the same token, the mechanism that gave them the power to act as they did within small groups, I'm assuming, that mechanism is most likely still in place. And I think that's why it's important to not only know the history, at least the last 50, 60 years of our country, but also to see how the country has changed and how there has been covert influence on our political events, on our relationships with other countries, and even on the domestic scene, what has happened here. There are still a lot of people that question the official narrative given by the Warren Commission in 64, I believe it was, or 65, 64, yes. And I think the role of Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, has been coming under different lights, so to speak. And much of his image has been tarnished by what is essentially the portrayal of a man with strengths and faults.
That's a kind explanation of him.
Well,
he basically started his career as a school teacher and ultimately got into politics. He lost his first run because the ballot boxes were stuffed by his opponent. So he got smart, and during the next election, he arranged the same, and he won. And that's ultimately his beginning in politics. And his claim to fame was he was a mover and a shaker, in behind the scenes in Washington, and that was his value to Kennedy for the election. But the thing is, he did have very, very shady background, and certainly did not do too well in terms of running Vietnam. I mean, he escalated us into Vietnam, and then when he realized it was a losing battle, what do? Quit. I'm not going to, try to be reelected, and he handed it off after being like a one-term president.
Yes.
But
no, it's certainly something that should be discussed not only in history class, let's say on a high school level, but something that could be investigated and possibilities debated. I think one of the reasons, and I'm glad you called, Kurt. I appreciate your input, and I appreciate this mystery as a possible one to be cleared up and given some closure later this year. But once you look into some of these cases, it's kind of jarring to see parallels between what happened then and what's happening now, because as I said before, I think many of the same mechanisms that kind of stretch their muscles for the first time in the 60s or even going back into the 50s are still with us. And hence the importance of, first of all, a public interest in what really happened, a public appreciation for where we've come as a country, where we were 50 years ago, and how it is we wound up where we are in this current situation. And a recognition of the mechanisms, covert, I'm going to say they're covert because they're certainly not 6 o'clock news material, that, that are behind either inaction with regards to the missing POWs or possibly criminal negligence in suppressing testimony of locals in spotting Caucasian men in, for lack of a better term, I don't know what the expression is, but the black garb that the North Vietnamese carry or wear. And suppression of evidence, whether it's removing concrete that or a footprint that could lead to another shooter, possibly, or the political motivation. It's I think we are closer to, without naming it, getting a handle on this mechanism, and hopefully through declassification of information, shedding a light in a very dark corner.
Yeah.
So,
the famous saying, those who don't study history will be, doomed to repeat it. And,
that's very true.
We certainly don't want to continue on that kind of vein of this covert activity going on in the background and having it business as usual. I mean, we're a much better country than that. And it's just unfortunate these things had happened, but we certainly don't want to see them repeated.
No, of course not. Kurt, I've gotten a signal for 5 minutes. I'm going to say goodbye, and then perhaps another caller will come in.
All right.
All right, so
Thanks
we
so much for
will
your time,
stay
Bill.
in touch.
I appreciate you having me on.
No. We will stay in touch, and I'll let you, perhaps you'll call on the next question next week with a more streamlined system for communicating.
Okay, well, everybody has to start from somewhere, and you always get glitches on the first day, so
yes,
you're doing fine.
All of us are doing fine here. Okay, take care, Kurt.
All right, well, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Okay, so there you have an example of what I'm hoping will be the type of program that we'll be offering here on Thursdays at 6 p.m., whereby I bring up a question, this evening's question: what mystery would you like to see cleared up over the next 12 months by the U.S. government? And your input. What, from your perspective, what's important? What's important that to you in your view of where we are as a country with this particular question? So we will be. So we've got about another 4 minutes, another 2 minutes. So again, I want to thank you for your patience in tuning in later than scheduled. We will have a more streamlined communication system in place, and I look forward to hearing from you during this call-in program and offer you the chance to speak your mind on whatever the topic is that the question embodies. So, unless there's another call, I am going to wish you all a good evening. Thank you for tuning in. Again, Morse, and we will be back next Thursday at 6 p.m. And I believe the question will be if you were given the resources to live anywhere else in the world, where would you live? Again, if world, where would you live and why? That's the question for next week. Okay? I think once we get going, we get for next week. Okay? I think once we get going, we get behind us. I'd like to go back to this question of mysteries being solved or secrets being revealed